Amber, the product of tree resin becoming fossilized, has the potential to preserve ancient creatures in stunning detail. Tiny animals that became ensnared in the sticky resin can become encapsulated and frozen in time for millions of years as the substance hardens around them. Many of these discoveries look like they just died yesterday, when in fact they've been trapped in amber since the time of the dinosaurs. Jurassic Park made amber fossils famous as a hypothetical way to preserve the DNA of ancient animals inside the mosquitoes that fed on them while they were alive. Unfortunately, it turns out that DNA cannot be extracted from amber, and in other well-preserved fossils, it doesn't survive for more than about 2 million years anyway. Although a real-life dinosaur theme park is off the table for now, there are nevertheless some sensational amber discoveries out there. From tiny lizards encased in the substance to baby dinosaur wings with minuscule feathers preserved, let's take a look at 5 more prehistoric creatures found trapped in amber. First of all, one of the most incredible recent amber discoveries is that of a tiny prehistoric crab, frozen in 99 million-year-old amber dug up in Myanmar. This fossil might also be one of the funniest looking amber specimens of them all. I know it's tragic that this little guy died like this, but it just looks so annoyed by the whole thing, with its little claws raised up like that. Anyway, this nearly 100 million-year-old crab is an exceptional discovery because animals that live in the water are rare to find as amber inclusions, because the source of the amber comes from trees. Therefore, terrestrial creatures are much more likely to get stuck in resin. However, clearly, water-living animals can also become stuck given the right conditions. So what was this crab doing that caused it to meet this unfortunate end all those millions of years ago in the Cretaceous period? The crab is highly significant for learning more about these crustaceans' evolutionary history, as it's actually the oldest ever modern-looking crab to be found as a fossil. As well as this, it's also considered to be the most complete fossil crab ever found, with numerous intricate details of its anatomy perfectly preserved in the amber. The paleontologists who studied this specimen were able to use this detailed anatomy to establish that it belongs to a species that was new to science, which they named Cretapsara athenata, meaning the immortal Cretaceous spirit of the clouds and waters. A very cool name for a very cool fossil. Cretapsara still has all of its delicate features intact, including the crab's antennae, its compound eyes atop its eye stalks, tiny hairs on its mouth parts, and even the gills. All of these details are visible in an animal that has a leg span of just 5 millimeters across, or about 0.2 inches. It really is absolutely insane how well amber can preserve ancient animals. Analysing the evolutionary relationships of Cretapsara to modern crab lineages, the scientists found that it actually groups within the so-called higher true crab group, the one that includes most of the living true crabs seen in our modern world. For the Cretaceous crustacean to have become ensnared in resin, much to its irritation I'm sure, going by the looks on its mouth parts, it must have been walking about in the proximity of a coastal forest, or perhaps near some sort of freshwater body in a forested region. Looking at the composition of the amber itself and the lack of any marine organisms trapped in the same piece, this supports the idea that the resin flowed into a freshwater or brackish setting, where the crab became stuck. The anatomy of Cretapsara indicates that it was not a fully land-living crab, as its gills were not reduced, and so it was definitely living in water, but was perhaps able to spend some time venturing out of it for short periods. As such, it's most likely that Cretapsara was an inhabitant of small bodies of freshwater on the forest floor. The existence of a freshwater true crab about 100 million years ago is very intriguing, as the only fossil evidence of non-marine crabs that were moving onto land and into freshwater before the discovery of Cretapsara dates to much more recently, between about 75 and 50 million years ago. However, some research examining molecular evidence to determine when non-marine crabs might have evolved predicted that they would have split off from marine crabs sometime in the earlier Cretaceous, before about 130 million years ago. Therefore, the discovery of Cretapsara, a freshwater crab living 99 million years ago, very nicely bridges this predicted gap, and provides supporting evidence that freshwater crabs indeed have an origin this far back in deep time. So thanks to this marvellous amber discovery of a poor little crab trapped for all this time, we've learned so much more about the evolutionary history of one of the planet's most iconic groups of animals. Our next entry is technically 12 entries, but these amber fossils were all published together, so let's count them as one. The 12 specimens are mostly the bodies of tiny little lizards, encased in 99 million-year-old amber, also from Myanmar. They preserve some extraordinary details of scales, claws, toe pads, and even the internal skeletons of these creatures. These discoveries of prehistoric lizards in amber were particularly significant as they provide us with a window into the diversity of the little reptiles at this point in time during the mid-Cretaceous period, and specifically in the tropics of the Cretaceous world. Of the 12 lizards, 3 of them come from ancient relatives of geckos, one of them was thought to be a prehistoric kind of chameleon, while the rest come from a variety of other lizard groups. One of the best preserved specimens is an animal belonging to the lacertoid lizards, a group that includes about 720 living species found worldwide. Beautiful details of its scales can be studied through the amber, and by utilizing CT scans taken of the specimens, which allow them to be examined digitally in 3 dimensions. This lacertoid also had remarkably long fingers and claws. Looking at them, they really do look like tiny spindles, which would presumably have been very useful for climbing trees, where this unfortunate creature eventually got stuck in resin and met its end. Recognizing what they considered to be a prehistoric chameleon in the selection of amber fossils was also a very exciting discovery for the paleontologists, as no chameleon fossils this old had ever been found before, with members of this lineage only known from after the age of the dinosaurs. The researchers who described the fossil noted how the tiny creature possessed a rather elongated structure that would have been embedded within the tongue and appeared to be part of the anatomy, enabling it to employ the specialized ballistic feeding method used by modern chameleons, where they shoot their tongues out incredibly rapidly to capture prey. So it seems this Cretaceous creature also had such a mechanism for propelling its tongue out. However, once this interpretation of an ancient chameleon relative preserved in amber was published, a couple of other paleontologists noticed something was not quite right. As it turns out, this fossil was not a chameleon relative at all. In fact, it's not even a reptile. In another paper published in 2020, these other paleontologists worked with the original authors to revise the interpretation of this animal, revealing that it's actually a kind of prehistoric amphibian called an albinopetontid, a lineage that existed from the Jurassic period until just 2 million years ago, also known as albies. Not only was this research a nice example of scientists collaborating with their critics and correcting their own past mistakes, but the realization that this was an amphibian was perhaps even more intriguing than it being a chameleon relative, as it seems that an extinct lineage of amphibians must have convergently evolved a chameleon-like ballistic feeding method. The albi was named as a new species, Yaksha peretii, after the Yaksha spirit, a guardian of natural treasures associated with trees and forests in Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist texts. This research also described a more complete skull belonging to the same species, which was also found trapped in amber, enabling the scientists to confirm what it really was. Yaksha even seems to prove that all albies were probably sit-and-wait predators that lived in the trees and shot their tongues out like chameleons, and externally they probably looked a lot more like lizards than salamanders. Although modern amphibians such as frogs and salamanders also shoot their tongues out, the feeding method in the albies evolved independently from them and shares more similarities with how chameleons project their tongues. So the discovery of these lizards, and the amphibian pretending to be a lizard, is another example of just how valuable amber fossils can be. These tiny specimens of Yaksha completely changed our understanding of how the albi lineage lived. Before its naming, it was thought that they were mostly burrowing animals. But now, thanks to these remarkable bodies trapped in amber, we know they were climbers with incredible slingshot tongues. Up next, we come to something that I bet you never expected we'd find trapped in amber: a penis. I promise I'm not joking. In 2016, paleontologists published a short communication announcing that they discovered a prehistoric harvestman, a kind of arachnid, with a, and I quote, fully extended penis. It's another discovery from the 99 million-year-old deposits of Myanmar, and what a rather surprising find this was. The little arachnid forever caught in this moment belongs to a species called Halitherses gramaldii, and apart from the obvious aspect, it's interesting in another way, as this specimen ended up changing the classification of prehistoric harvestmen, revealing that there had been a previously unrecognized extinct family of these arachnids living during the age of the dinosaurs. The paleontologists described the harvestman's member in a fair bit of detail, explaining that it's very slender, elongate, and curves up slightly, and has a spatulate heart-shaped glans, plus a small stylus that extends out of it and is twisted at the tip. The anatomy of the male reproductive organ is quite important for working out the evolutionary relationships of living harvestmen, and so the detailed preservation of this ancient example is actually very useful. As the paleontologists describe, the genital anatomy in the amber-bound Halitherses is unique to the species, and differs in several ways from modern species, which is one of the ways they were able to establish that it belonged to a family new to science. Amber really is a marvellous medium. Who would have thought that we could learn this much about the anatomy of a 100-million-year-old arachnid penis? You are welcome for this knowledge. Moving now to yet another exceptional specimen found in Myanmar amber that dates to about 99 million years ago, these amber deposits threw up another surprising find that was published in 2019, the shell of an ammonite of all things. Ammonites are an entirely extinct lineage of cephalopods that died out during the famous mass extinction which wiped out all the non-bird dinosaurs at the end of the Cretaceous period. As cephalopods, they're related to the squid, cuttlefish, octopuses, and nautiloids, which contain the living nautilus species. And although they appear somewhat similar to the modern nautilus with their coiled shells, there are many differences that separate them as distinct lineages. But ammonites are of course marine animals that inhabited the prehistoric seas. So how on earth did this one end up getting stuck in tree resin? The ammonite is not the only creature trapped in this piece of amber. Accompanying the cephalopod in its 100-million-year-old tomb are at least 40 other creatures. Bizarrely, most of these animals are terrestrial in origin, with spiders, millipedes, mites, cockroaches, beetles, flies, and wasps also contained in the 1.3-inch long piece of amber. But then there are also some isopods in the amber that would have lived on shorelines, plus 4 marine gastropods, or sea snails. It seems that everything was a target for this vicious mass-murdering tree. That prehistoric resin was unstoppable. What appears to have happened here to result in so many animals living in diverse habitats to become stuck in this single piece of amber is that the prehistoric forest the Myanmar amber derives from was situated near a coastline with an estuary. Somehow, either the resin made its way from the tree and then down onto a beach, or alternatively something happened to carry marine organisms from the sea and into the forest. One such scenario hypothesized by the paleontologists who studied the specimen was that a tsunami washed the ammonite and the sea snails into the trees, or perhaps an unusually strong tropical storm event brought the seashells inland. However, the most likely scenario favoured by the paleontologists was simply that the forest was growing near a beach environment, and after dropping from a tree, the resin flow managed to collect a variety of coastal and marine invertebrate animals as they were washed onto the shore. The discovery of the ammonite, which the researchers identify as a juvenile specimen of Puzosia, opens up another very exciting possibility: the first ever preservation of ammonite soft tissues in amber. Despite being an astoundingly abundant and common type of fossil to find in many places around the world, we know relatively little about the soft parts of ammonites, as these only fossilize on exceedingly rare occasions. Even when some soft tissue remains have been discovered, these are limited to the internal organs, with the arms and other soft parts, such as the eyes, remaining entirely unknown in the fossil record. The Puzosia ammonite most likely lacks soft tissues because it had been dead for a while before the shell ended up in the resin, and the aperture of the shell is filled with coarse sand, suggesting it may have been washed onto the beach or into shallow waters. So although this ammonite in amber unfortunately doesn't preserve any soft tissues, the fact that these iconic prehistoric cephalopods can turn up in amber fossils at all provides some hope that maybe, just maybe, one day we might find an ammonite with its soft parts entombed in hardened resin. As unlikely as that is, I don't think anyone was really expecting to see an ammonite in amber to begin with, so this is another truly mind-blowing amber discovery. Finally, let's have a look at some baby dinosaur wings that were found trapped in amber. These are again just absolutely stunning fossils, opening a window into an incredible ancient world filled with a diverse array of dinosaur species. Once again, they come from the 99-million-year-old amber deposits of Myanmar, and belonged to some very tiny juveniles. 2 exceptionally preserved wings were discovered in the same piece of amber, both of them preserving the tiny fingers and claws of these minuscule dinosaurs, as well as remnants of their skin, muscles, and feathers. Preserved three-dimensionally, the anatomy of these stunning partial wings allowed paleontologists to work out that these were from babies of an extinct lineage of flying dinosaurs, a bird group known as the Enantiornithines. They died out at the end of the Cretaceous, along with all the non-bird dinosaurs, but they were incredibly diverse during the earlier parts of the period. Most Enantiornithines still had teeth in their jaws and clawed fingers on their wings, but overall, they would have looked fairly similar to many modern birds. The scientists carefully examined the specimens with microscopes and again utilized X-ray micro-CT scanning to create digital models of the wings, allowing an even better view of what's inside the amber. The wings differ in size and so are definitely from two different individuals, but given their similar overall structures, they are thought to be from the same species of Enantiornithine. This discovery shows that the juveniles of Enantiornithine birds were very precocial animals, meaning that not long after they hatched, they were independent and able to move about and probably feed themselves. Although both wings are very small and likely came from very recent hatchlings, the feathers are not furled up and do not otherwise indicate that they are at an immature stage, and instead look like they were well suited for use in flight. So these absolutely tiny baby birds, almost immediately after leaving the egg, could already flap their wings and take to the ancient skies. They did not have to go through a molting stage and emerged with full flight feathers, which would have been a good survival strategy in most cases, except these two babies presumably then landed in a tree and found themselves in a very sticky situation, too tiny to escape the deadly resin. Tragically, within the amber itself, the paleontologists also noticed several scratch marks made by the claws inside the resin near one of the wings. It seems that at least one of these little birds was indeed still alive when it got overwhelmed by the resin flow, and tried desperately to claw its way out, but clearly it wasn't enough, and it presumably died with its wing stuck in the resin, with the rest of the body eventually decaying and becoming lost, but the wing remaining frozen in time. Despite this terrible end for these baby birds, the scientific data their remains provide us with is truly remarkable. Not only are the tiny filaments on all the feathers visible in unbelievable detail, but remnants of the colours that the feathers would have been in life can also be seen. The feathers on the tops of the wings were darker shades but also had bands of lighter feathers across them, while the underside of the wing also had a pale or white coloured section which then gave way to the darker primary flight feathers. So tiny dinosaur wings from 99 million years ago are another of the fantastic amber discoveries made in recent years. They reveal so much about how these creatures looked and lived, and tell a tragic story about how they died, struggling in sticky resin. Although they lost their lives in a horrible way, their existence is still remembered all these millions of years later, thanks to the incredible preservational power of amber. I know this video is called 5 prehistoric creatures found trapped in amber, but before I end the video I want to mention a bonus 6th entry. This is another stunning amber fossil from Myanmar that includes a prehistoric battle to the death, as an ancient spider is frozen in the act of attacking a wasp that was stuck in its web. This amber piece also preserves the oldest known evidence of social behaviour in spiders, as there are multiple individuals sharing the web, and I made a whole video dedicated to this incredible find, which will be linked in the description below, and should be popping up as a card on screen now, so go and watch that to learn more about just how amazing amber is. Also, before this video ends, I want to include a brief disclaimer. I've discussed this in a bit more detail in my previous 5 prehistoric creatures in amber video, but the study of amber from Myanmar has become very controversial, as there were claims that the sale of amber fossils was helping to fund violence in Kachin state, and the mining conditions were extremely dangerous. In some cases, underage workers were reportedly used to excavate it. The Society of Vertebrate Paleontology in April 2020 issued a statement discouraging scientists from purchasing or studying amber from the country obtained after June 2017, when the Myanmar military took control of the area. Although some paleontologists criticised this decision, arguing that the sale of amber fossils contributed very little to funding the conflict, the Society issued another statement in June 2021, suggesting a temporary ban on publishing any Myanmar amber fossils obtained after January 2021, due to the military coup on the 1st of February that year and the ongoing civil war. It's a complex issue, but there is a human cost involved in obtaining these amber fossils. I thought it was important to at least mention in this video, and I couldn't in good conscience omit some kind of statement about the situation. I will include links to additional resources in the description below if you want to learn more. Well, there we go, 5 more strange prehistoric creatures found trapped in amber. These videos are really fascinating to research, so I'd love to do more if people are enjoying them. Do let me know if you want some more in the comments below. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my other channel, 7 Days of Science. Over on this channel, my co-presenters and I make weekly videos covering all the most fascinating science news of the past week. So if you'd like a good way to keep up to date with the latest discoveries, including the newest amber discoveries, you might like what we do over there. We also have a Patreon page where you can support us in return for some fun bonus content, and we've just started up an email, 7dos.stories@gmail.com, where we encourage researchers to contact us if they'd like us to feature their work, or if anyone in the audience would like to provide us with feedback on how we can improve the show. Please do like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and be sure to press that bell icon so you don't miss our next upload, and so you can learn more about our world, its history, and the wonderful life that surrounds us all.